What's going on, everybody? Cody with Ditch Panda Bass Fishing, back with you guys for another video. Today's video, we're talking all about jigs. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of confusion when it comes to this bait. Let's try to fix that. Let's get into it.
Dadgum Ditch Panda.
All right, guys, so there are 4 million types of jigs made by every single tackle company in the entire world. There's 300 different weights for them, and starting bass fishing or just fishing in general, even if you've been fishing a long time, where in the world do you start when you're looking at so many jigs? So what we wanted to do was talk to you guys about how we do our jig fishing, how we attack our jig arsenal, and make it simpler, a little bit easier for you guys to maybe make your decision on how you're going to fish jigs going into the future, or maybe help you guys if you're already fishing them now, and just kind of simplify it for you. So first thing I want to do is I want to talk about jig heads. There are, again, 4 million types of them. There's Arky Head, brush jigs, there's heavy cover jig, there's football jigs, there's finesse jigs, there's round ball jigs, all kinds. I mean, each company's got their own. You got the Boss 4x4, you've got flat bottom, stand-up jigs. It is ridiculous. And what me and Paul do is we really take that and we simplify it down to what we're actually going to be fishing and what each of those jig heads does for us and how we can make it work for us. So doing that, we've simplified it down to 4 different heads, and that's what we do here, and you can see. So we do grass jigs or brush jigs, which just have a pointy head. I'll show you guys. Just have something with a little bit, you guys can see that. It's just pointed. It comes through the grass, it comes through the brush a little bit easier. So we have those. We have the Arky Jigs or skipping jigs, and these are really the go-to for us. There's your Arky Head Jig. It's just, you have semi-flat surface here. It's good for skipping. It's rounded up. It's nice and wide, so it does skip really well, but it's also just an all-around great jig for doing whatever you're looking to do with a jig. Now, we also have, moving in, football jigs. So-called because their head's shaped like a football. We've all seen them. We use those. And as far as regular size jigs, that's as far as we go. The brush, the Arky Head, and the football. When we pass that, we're going into our finesse jigs. And we really only use one style of jig when it comes to finesse fishing, and we'll get back into that. But for right now, let's just talk about just the finesse jig. Small, lighter jig head, less skirt material to cut at the top. We've all seen them, light wire hook. So let's talk about why we've simplified this down to only these 4 heads when there's so many out there and there's so many different weights. Another thing you'll see when you're looking at mine and Paul's jig box is there's only 2 different weights. All of our regular jigs are all 1/2 ounce. When it comes to the finesse jigs, they're all 5/16. They're all 5/16 because we really like, me especially, Paul likes dirty jigs, but I really like Greenfish tackles, itsy bitsy finesse jig, and they come in 5/16. It's basically a quarter. But that being said, we stick to 1 weight for our jigs. 1 weight for our regular size and 1 weight for our finesse jigs. It really just takes all the confusion out of it when you're on the water. There has probably never been a time that I can remember where I was fishing and I had a 1/2 ounce jig tied on and I thought, man, I would really love to have a 3/8 ounce jig instead. Or man, I'd really love to have a 5/8 ounce jig, or I'd like to have a 3/4 ounce jig. The 1/2 ounce just works for us. It's a perfect all around weight in our opinion. You can fish it shallow, you can fish it deep, Yes, it might take a little bit longer for that thing to get down there and, you know, fishing 20 feet of water or deeper. But for the hassle in my brain, for my organization skills, and just for organization in general, it's worth it for us to just run the half ounce. And as far as the finesse, again, quarter ounce, 5/16, whatever you're gonna say, I've never been, man, I wish I had a 3/8, or man, I wish I had a 1/8. The quarter ounce or the 5/16 ounce, it just works for us. And really, it's just, again, it's a mindset thing and an organization thing within the boat. So we talked about the four heads. Let's get into why we use these four heads and why we don't stray into anything else. The brush jig, the grass jig, as we call them most of the time. We use them because they're good for just that. They're good for fishing around grass. The pointed head makes them come through grass a little bit easier. This one is I think it's the Brent Ayler head. It actually has a horizontal line tie, which makes it come through the grass a little less good. But as you can see, this one, real pointy head, vertical line tie. This thing comes through grass without getting hung up, without getting all gunked up. Better than, say, you know, a football jig with a nice wide head. And it's picking up all that gunk on the bottom. So this jig probably gets used the least for Paul and myself, because when we're fishing around grass that can be fished with a jig that's light enough to fish with a jig, but also, you know, provide good cover, we're probably not fishing that grass with a jig. But it does come on occasion when we need a good brush jig, and that's why we have them, just so we're not dealing with the headache of pulling nasty grass or pulling, you know, blades of grass out from the skirt material every cast. It's just a headache, and we can mitigate that by using the grass jig. That's why it makes the arsenal. Let's talk about the Arky Head Jig. The Arky Head Jig is mine and Paul. I know mine for sure. I'm not going to speak for him. It's my favorite jig. Again, it's just got an arc to it. The head just has an arc. That's why we call it an Arky Jig. You guys have seen them before. They cast really well. They fish multiple things decent, really well on other things, and they're just a really good all-around jig. Again, you can skip it. You can drag it. It's wide enough. It's a wide enough head, like the football jig, that you can drag it and it doesn't want to rock either way. It's slim enough that you can get it around some sparse grass and still fish through it. It's the perfect all-around jig, in my opinion. I use that one the most. It gets a little hung up when you come on to like chunk rock or rip wrap, like the football head jig. It's not as bad as the football head jig, but if I'm going to fish chunk rock, I'll go with the Arky head. But it will get hung up. You guys are going to have to just know that you're fishing those, that you're going to get hung up. You're going to have to go get those jigs a lot of time. But that's all there is to it. There's not a jig that comes through chunk rock really well. So I just use the Arky. It makes my life so much easier. It fishes timber really well. Again, it comes over sticks and laydowns underwater well, because it's got a pretty flat surface and it's wide, so it's not tumbling over and rolling the hook on and getting snagged. An all-around great jig. I think it should be in everyone's arsenal, especially if you're fishing jigs a lot. It just gets the job done in all kinds of places. And the last jig head for our like regular size jigs, the football. And this is the dragger. I would say if I have that Arky Head Jig tied on 40% of the time, I've got this tied on 40% of the time as well. And then maybe the Finesse Jig gets a little bit in the winter and stuff, or if the day's hard, and then the grass jig almost never. But the football headed jig is a dragon jig. This is for those nice hard bottoms, pea gravel, sparse chunk rock on deeper points or not deep points, but hard bottom points, hard bottom in general. Very important. This thing makes a lot of commotion on the bottom. So if you don't have hard bottom, if you've got mud or if you've got silt, this thing tends to come across and really stir up the bottom, and it makes it so they can't see it. So you really want to be cautious of that. But if you guys have hard bottom, if you've got deep points or you've got good points where it's, you know, pea gravel or sparse rock, clay, these things excel. They drag them. They're wide body like a football, obviously, as per the name. These things do not tip over. You can drag them. You can feel every rock when you hit it. You come over it. They come over rock pretty well if they're sparse. And if I'm dragging a jig, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a football. And the football head is your dragger. And like I said, for me, it gets used probably half the time. Let's get into the finesse jig. The finesse jig really only comes out, it doesn't get used a whole lot, but it gets used and it has its place, and it's an important place. In the wintertime, when you're around those points, like you're going to fish the football head jig on, or you're around those docks, or around those laydowns, or around that chunk rock that you were going to fish an Arky Head Jig on. But those are just a little too big a profile. That's when finesse jigs really shine. If the jig bite's on, but you're not getting a bunch of bites, and you need more bites, who doesn't need more bites? That's when we go to the finesse jig. The best thing about it is you can run a big trailer on it and still go for bigger bites. You can run a small trailer on it and get more bites. And the best thing about the Greenfish tackle Itsy Bitsy is it's got a stand-up head. It's got a flat head. This thing comes down and stands straight up. What I like about that is in those finesse situations, this thing comes down, it hits bottom, and it stands there. And I don't have to do much to it. If I've got a trailer on it, the water, just the movement of the water or the light movement of my hand on the rod is going to move those pinchers just a little bit. I don't have to move the jig. So when it comes to really hard situations, really difficult, tough bites for the day, and the finesse jig is the one you're going to go to, I really, really suggest going with a stand-up head. Something that will sit down at the bottom, and without you moving it, it's not going to fall over, or with you dragging it just a little, it's not going to fall over. It's going to stand up nice and straight and give you those real subtle movements. It's going to get those fish to eat. As we know, a lot of time, especially in the winter, it takes a long time for a fish to get to a bait. If I can flip this thing out next to a dock and it comes down, it sits straight up, and I let it sit, I could soak this thing for a minute or two. And that bass is going to come down as it's falling, and it's going to come down real slow, all lethargic, and stare at it. And after a while, those little flippers on your trailer moving, he's not going to be able to take it anymore. That's why this thing gets bit in the wintertime, especially when, or anytime conditions get tough. It's an easy meal for them, and it flat catches fish. So, I want to talk a little bit about equipment we use for these. Some mistakes I think some guys are making that I actually made for a long time. Let's talk about rods. You know what? Let's get reels out of the way first. This is a good example I have sitting here. This is an 8:3-to-1 gear ratio reel, high-speed casting reel. I throw this for all my full-size jigs, the grass, the Arky, the football, all of the time. Something high-speed, something comfortable that you can throw and pitch around for a long time. Light is good. That's what you want to go with your regular-sized jigs. Again, we run half ounce. As far as the finesse jigs, you can throw them on spinning tackle. 1/4 ounce, it's not that big of a deal. They have a real light wire hook, and you can throw them on spinning tackle. I don't like to. I like to throw them on a medium action casting rod, again, with the same type of reel. It's just a little more comfortable for me, and I can get a little more pinpoint flips if I'm flipping them for the finesse jig. But a spinning tackle works. A lot of people do it. You don't have a problem. The hooks are light wire enough. If you've got a good branded company, their hooks are going to be light wire on finesse jigs. You're not going to have a problem getting your hook set. If you guys like to use a spinning tackle, go ahead. I prefer casting. It just makes it a little easier. It's a little more comfortable. Okay, the reels are knocked out of the way. Let's get into rods. This is where I think a lot of people mess up, and I did the same thing for a very long time. For a very long time, I used a heavy, fast action rod for my jig fishing. And I think a lot of people are doing this. I've seen a lot of people do this, and it is just not the right rod for you guys. It took me a long time to get off the heavy, fast action rod for jig fishing. And let me tell you why it's not the right rod and what it fixes. So it's a heavy, fast action rod. It's basically my flipping rod. That tip is fast. That's the fast action. You got a lot of backbone. What that does is jigs are inherently have bad hook sets. Especially when it comes to the football jig, you know, big, wide head. You know, they say the football jig, they don't really talk about it. You don't hear a lot of people talking about hookup ratio with other jigs too much, but I'm here to tell you it's just almost just as bad with any other. Again, you've got this good-sized piece of lead or tungsten, which would be smaller, coming through a fish's mouth. And especially if you're coming straight up, you know, you're going to blow their mouth open sometimes. It just happens. There's different reels, there's different sets for football jigs and all that. But I think you can get rid of a lot of that with going to a different rod. So that heavy fast action rod, when you take that step back and you give them the lumber, that thing's a broomstick, right? It's ripping that thing out right now. It's not loading up. That jig is moving out of that fish's mouth right there. So that's why you might be getting bad hookup ratios with your jigs on that rod. If you're going to continue using that rod, don't get me wrong. I think that the heavy fast action rod is a great jig rod only if you're fishing around things where you've got to horse them out. If you've got to get them over, you know, trees or dock wire, or if you're casting into precarious situations where you need to get them turned and the way you want them really quickly, then yeah, you can still use the heavy. Be aware you need to use the correct hook set, especially with the football jig. The football jig is not a step back, give them the lumber, right? With the football jig, and I do with the Arky Head Jig as well, if I'm using a heavier action rod because I need to get them out of somewhere, you need to use a reel set. And what that is, if you guys don't know, say you're fishing your jig, you feel the bite. Instead of stepping forward, giving them the lumber, all you do is reel down until you feel the tension. And that's the fish that's holding onto your jig. When you feel that tension, all you have to do is just lean back. You leaning back with that hook already up against the roof of his mouth is going to set the hook for you. As soon as he pulls, you're going to get it all the way through. So if you're going to continue using the heavy fast action, make sure you're using that hook set. You're going to keep a lot more fish pinned. Now, what we've gone to pretty recently, actually, and that's a medium heavy fast action or moderate fast, depending on the rod company. I really wouldn't go moderate fast with most of them. Some of them, you know, each rod company's action is a little different, but medium heavy fast action rod, it gives you a little more parabolic bend and it gives you a slower tip just because it's not so thick all the way up. It doesn't have the backbone. And what that does is it really gives you a cushion on your hook set. I still wouldn't give the frog hook set, step back and give it to them, but you don't have to be as cautious when it comes to your hook sets. If you get a surprise buy or you buy in the fall, you know, and you're in a tournament, you're not thinking about it and you freak out and just jam them home. With that medium heavy fast action, you can get away with it. And that's why I love it. Most rod companies make a jig rod. It's a medium heavy. There's a weird spectrum with that, though. Most rod companies will have a medium heavy, moderate fast. Then you'll have a jig rod that's all the way up to the heavy fast action. So make sure when you're buying one, buy what you need. We really like that medium heavy. Like I said, it kind of just takes all the guesswork out of it. If you're paying attention, which we all should be all the time, and you get the bite, I still will do a reel set where I reel down, feel it, and then jam up. But like I said, it takes that away where you get the bite that you're not expecting or you're not paying attention, and you just hammer them home, and you're going to get that bite, that fish to the boat more often than not. So that's rod. Like I said, it's pretty important. You just got to know if you're going to use that heavy fast action rod. Pay attention, know your hook set, and get that fish to the boat. Let's talk about the hook itself and your weed guard. We're going to go in depth here just a little bit more. These are Greenfish tackle crawballs. There's the football head jig. You'll notice that this hook, still not a real fat hook. This is a 4/0. I know a lot of companies will put a 5, 6/0 hooks on their jigs. I'm not into that. If I'm looking for a jig, I wanted to have a 4/0 hook for my standard size jigs, down to 3 or 2 for my finesse jigs. And I believe 2 is probably the most popular there. What that does again is it kind of just takes that worry away when it comes to your hook sets. I know I've been preaching a lot about that for the last few minutes, but you don't have to fire home at those guys with a lighter wire hook because you're not getting as much metal through them. So I really look for something with a 4/0, no bigger. I know some of those 3/4 ounce, like mop jig and stuff like that, go up to like a 6/0 hook, or some even bigger I've seen. And I just don't need that. It's just too much more for me to worry about. So we really like a 4/0 hook with our standard jigs, and about a 2. These are a 2 on the Itsy Bitsy from Greenfish Tackle. My Arky Head Jigs, I'll link in the description where I get them. They're not from a company that you can get on Tackle Warehouse or Tackle Direct. It's actually a lady that owns her own company back east, and she makes great jigs. That being said, let's talk about what we look for in a good jig. Let's talk about the Greenfish Tackle Crawball. So again, the first thing I'm looking for, the very first thing I'm looking for is the tie. I don't do any rubber banded ties anymore. All our jigs, every one of these jigs here, all wire tied. That means is it's tied, the skirt material is tied around the head, around the jig head with wire. Not with that little rubber band that's going to break after it sits in the sun for 5 minutes, and you're going to lose your jig, and it's going to move down, or it's going to sprint around, and all your jig material is going to be on one side. I go wire tied jigs, no exceptions on that. I just can't stand that rubber band. Again, we already talked about the hook. I'm looking for something with a 4/0 hook for the regular, for our regular size jigs. Baked. I would like a baked head. What that means is the paint that's put on, it's then cured in an oven, doesn't chip. It won't chip quite as bad. I went through a couple brands jigs where one cast dragging it with the football jig, and I peeled almost all the paint off of it back down to lead. Durable baked head, I'm looking for that. When it comes to the skirt material, I really like living rubber. Paul really likes living rubber, and when you mix that living rubber with the silicone skirt material, you really get a good presentation in the water. Now, living rubber is a much finer, you can see it a little better because there's more of it in the finesse jig. Let's do that real quick. Let's show you guys. This is living rubber. It's very soft. It's very pliable. It floats in the water. It moves a lot. It's not just sticking straight up. That's why on finesse jigs I really like it, because it's giving you that stop but still motion. Now, when it comes to football jigs and the other Arky jigs, I like to have that living rubber plus the silicone skirt material. The silicone material will come up and stand up, and that living rubber kind of floats like this around. And it just gives that secondary motion that fish are looking for to trigger them, say, this thing's real, I want to eat it. That's why I like living rubber so much. So if I can, I try to find jigs that are living rubber mixed in with regular skirt material. There's not a whole bunch of companies that are doing it, but if I can find it, or if you can find it, try it out if you haven't. I think it is responsible for a couple more bites on jigs, to be honest. Let's talk weed guard. This is basically the last thing I have to talk to you guys about, and we'll talk about general colors here in a second. The weed guard's pretty important. I like my weed guards. All they got to do is come to the tip of that hook. As long as they're deflecting things from getting onto the hook, that's all I care about. Sometimes you get companies that get really long and they'll come out almost to the bend. That's not good. If you guys got that, just trim them up. You can trim them to the barb, just past the barb. As long as the tip's covered, that's all right. Another good tip for you guys, if your weed guard is really stiff, so like, for instance, I can push this down pretty easily. It clears the hook. I don't have to worry about it. If you guys have a really stiff weed guard, what you can do, I'll just do it this one, is you can take it, and what I mean by stiff weed guard is you push this thing down, it's hard for you to get this down past the hook. Take your finger and separate out some of these strands, get your finger kind of in the middle, and then just push down like this. You guys can see. Push down, it'll kind of fray out your weed guard, and then that will give you a little more play, and you can actually cut. If it's real stiff, go down here and just start cutting out little single pieces until you've got it, the softness, stiffness that you want. You have to understand that weed guard is playing against you guys on the hook set. So on the hook set, you have to make sure that weed guard gets past the hook and the hook end of the fish's lip, right? So the weed guard is pretty important, something that people overlook a lot of the time. So make sure that that weed guard is set how you want it. Once you do have the fish hooked up, the weed guard is now working for you because it's actually in its mouth and popping out against it instead of working as coming through it and then the hook set. So weed guard, it's important. Pay attention to it. Last but not least, let's talk about general colors. Browns. Basically, I run some kind of pattern of brown, green pumpkin, and then black and blue for dirty water, and then red for springtime. Something for dirty water. We say this with our colors a lot. Something natural for clear water, something dark or very bright for dirty water, and then red for your springtime. When those craws stop molting, a red jig, it's beautiful. I love this color. Red and black, it works perfect. It looks just like a molting craw. It's like the perfect color. Keep it simple, guys. You don't need a bunch. I get it's fun. If you guys want to go buy a bunch of different colored jigs just because you have a tackle addiction like we do, go for it, man. Our favorite color, especially Paul, his favorite color is Magic Cross Swirl. You can see I've got 6 of those, and that's just green pumpkin with a little bit of blue swirled in. It's a great color all year long as long as you got clear water. Some type of black and blue or off the wall, a little bit different color. This is like a peanut butter jelly-ish. It's purple with a little bit of watermelon black. Looks good. That's a nice dark watercolor. Black and blue, obviously. Then I've got, we talked about the red. I've got a couple jigs. Well, I've got a few that actually are mostly green pumpkin or brown that have a little bit of orange or a little bit of red thrown in. I throw those a lot of time, early spring. Those are good when the craws just start to molt. Keep colors simple. It's no different with jigs. So, guys, I hope that cleared up any questions or concerns you might have with jigs. Making it simple. That's what me and Paul are all about. We don't have enough time and patience on the boat to be dealing with 500 different types of jig heads, 400 weights. Keep it simple. That's our goal with all of our tackle, with all of our fishing. If you can keep it simple, if you can get what you need on your rod and in the water with less headache and faster, you're going to catch more fish and catch better fish because you're going to be paying more attention. That being said, if you guys haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell, give the video a thumbs up, leave us a comment down below. Let us know some of your favorite jig companies, your favorite jig heads, anything that we do that you guys don't like. I'd love to hear that. And if this video helped you guys, let us know too. We'd love to hear that stuff. And any other thing you guys want to say, down in the comment section. Until next time, guys, thank you. I'm out.